Good morning, Joy-Nostalg, and welcome to another Forward Friday. And of course, it's still September, and therefore our theme for this month is unity. But this time, we will talk about unity and its practical applications through the perspective of a medical practitioner. For today, we have a special guest. His name is Dr. Adrian Velasco from the UP College of Medicine, class of 2019. He is currently a physician at the Pasig Centralized Quarantine Facility and at the Katwiran COVID Center in Taguig. He will share his insights to inspire and better equip the JNG community with practical application of knowledge and skills needed to live out our value of the month, unity. So JNG, let's all welcome Dr. Adrian Velasco. Good morning, Doc.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and I'm privileged to speak in front of you today. My topic is very timely because it has been, 6 months that we have been in this community quarantine. If you can all remember, it started in March 18, and now it's September, right? So it's a perfect time to talk about COVID and to really reflect on what has been learned in the past 6 months and what is yet to come in the coming months. So the topic of my slides is entitled Unity in Uncertainty, just to jump on your theme for the month and also to answer, to address uncertainties that we still have in this time. Uh, so the content of my talk would be, first I'm going to talk to you about my experiences in the front line so that you would have uh, a deeper understanding and appreciation of what we do as doctors and as nurses and as healthcare workers in general. And then the second one would be, I want to address the question, what happens when one catches COVID? I think that one is a very important question to tackle because a lot of the fear stems from the uncertainties of what will happen, right? But when you have an idea, a clear understanding of what happens to a patient, then you can probably be a little bit more appeased or comfortable. So you won't be scared as much if you have an idea of what the flow chart is. And in the third one, we will discuss something about what the new normal is going to be like. Okay, so as mentioned by Jello, I am connected with the two quarantine facilities in front of you right here. On the left side, you have Pasig, and it is located in the Rizal High School quarantine facility here in Canyogan. And on the right, we have Taguig COVID Center, right? So both of these are actually normally high schools. No? They are physically high schools that has been converted into temporary treatment and monitoring facility. So the wisdom is since the public schools are not utilized in their common use, like being classrooms and all, they are temporarily transformed into isolation facilities to care for patients. And this has been going on, or this has been applied to a lot of cities, not just Pasig and Taguig. So just to walk you through on what the frontline experience is, let me first start with the bad things. And then towards the end of it, I'm going to walk you through some of the good things. Let's face it, we have to protect ourselves, right? And in doing so, we have to endure wearing these very hot PPEs for extended hours. So level 3 PPE is comprised of a hazmat or the hazard suit, the overall, the white one here. We also have a head cap inside, a face shield. We also have to protect our eyes with goggles, a KN95 respirator, double gloves, and boots and shoe cover. So we normally wear this for about 3 to 4 hours a day. For some other institutions, they wear it for 6 hours, 12 hours straight. But we're lucky because in the quarantine facility, we have less time of exposure with the patients, and thus we have to wear them for lesser duration. After seeing the patients, we have to discard everything that you can see here. And the protocol is we have to take a shower. So before we leave the dirty zone, we have to take a bath and take a shower, scrub everything from our body so that we can now go and rejoin the clean zone. So that's part of the infection control protocol in hospitals and in facilities. We have designated hot zones, which are dirty zones. And then when we emerge to the clean zone, we have to disinfect our bodies as well. And part of that is to shower thoroughly. Other challenges of the work include the long working hours. So we have to work 24 hours at a time. And normally we string that along. Like you don't just work one shift, you work several shifts. So basically I clock in like 72 hours of work at a time. And then the heavy patient influx is also a challenge. We cannot really expect how much patients we're gonna see for that day because they come and go, right? It's also a challenge right now that healthcare workers are facing about compensation benefits. Like for example, some of my nurses don't even receive hazard pay, and some of them are not being compensated fairly. So that's one of the challenges as well. And of course, since we're dealing with a very infectious disease or infectious virus, our personal safety is always a concern. And when we go back to our families, right, so we have to also be extra careful not to bring home any infectious agents back to our own family. Now let me just walk you through some of the good things. Just like everyone else, doctors love to eat, and as seen in this set of photos right here, we actually have theme nights or theme days in which we set themes on what to eat. Like for example, one time my mom sent me a dim sum platter from your restaurant. Thank you for that, by the way. And my colleagues enjoyed it very much. And we also have a theme about like a dried fish, danggit, and fried dilis. Over this part, we had the theme night for seafood. So the wisdom is, since we cannot really leave the facility during duty, we actually try to make ourselves happy by eating what makes us happy. And this is what one of the good things, because we enjoy the food together and also we bond over it. Another very important highlight, I think, which is unique to my city, which is Pasig, is that the mayor is really very visible. No? So throughout my stint in this facility, I have seen him more than 20 times already. Because whenever there's something that is important, or whenever whenever we are going to send home a lot of patients, he will be there to congratulate the patients for their recovery. He listens to our concerns, and he would try as much as possible to accommodate our needs, and not only our needs but also the needs of the patients. Another thing is, sometimes in the course of our duty we would have free time, and thus we become creative in trying to entertain ourselves, since we cannot leave, right? Because when you're on duty, even if you're not doing anything, you're basically on call. If anything happens with the patients, you're there. You're paid to be in where you are, because even if nothing is happening, when anything comes up, the essence is you're there, and we're ready to respond, right? But so long as everything is benign and chill, we are able to do whatever we want. Like in the picture right here, I'm singing, and my colleague is playing computer games. My colleague is also doing some yoga, and sometimes we collect plants, no, to take care of plants like plantitas and plantitas. Just try to keep ourselves amused and sane during the duties. And I think this is actually one of the most important, gratifying thing about being a doctor or nurse at this point. To see our patients recover, it's actually a very heartwarming and fulfilling thing to see when your patient is recovering. Okay, so in the picture on the left, this is a mother, a 23-year-old mom. She got infected with COVID, probably exposed in the workplace, right? So when she went home to her son, the 1-year-old toddler was also infected. So it's a very difficult time for this family, obviously. And we were able to take care of the two of them in the facility. And this is the picture of when they graduated or when they recovered. No? This is our mayor handing the certificate of recovery for these two patients. And everyone was ecstatic about this one, because we don't normally see toddlers or very young people catching this particular virus. In the picture on the right, this is a conversation that I had with one of my patients, or one of daughters of my patient, and she was just trying to thank me for everything that has been done for her mom. And I think it is things like this that make our work extra fulfilling. I mean, yes, we're paid, yes, we're protected with PPE, and yes, we took an oath to do all of this. But uh, seeing people improve and seeing the lives of people improve because of what we do, I think that provides a different kind of unique value to what we do here. So we get tired a lot of times, but things like this make me excited to go to work still at this, even if we are also stretched thin already. It's things like this that make us continue. So that has been a very brief walk on my experience as a frontliner. I didn't really want to spend most of my time talking about the negative things because I want to be positive, and I want to project something positive to this audience. So now let me address the question: what happens when one catches COVID-19? I think there's a lot of tension in among patients because when they catch COVID, they don't really know what's gonna happen to them. So there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of tension within them, right? So I'm just going to walk you through on how our healthcare system works. So this is quite a busy slide, but I hope everyone would stay with me in when I explain the slides. The three at the top includes local health center, hospital, and employer, right? So these are the three things that would commonly diagnose a patient. With respect to the employer, I think this one would be the most relevant to your institution because you are, after all, a corporation or a company, right? Normally, employers would require pre-employment swab or routine testing. And thus, the employer would be able to catch which among the employees would be possibly infected, right? So when the employer catches a patient that is infected, the employer must coordinate with the epidemiological surveillance unit or the CESU. When you're living in a city, you call it the CESU or the City Epidemiological Surveillance Unit. When you're living in the provinces, we call it the RESU or the Regional Epidemiological Surveillance Unit. So the CESU or the RESU would function to document and to report the cases to the national government. And of also, the CESU would also be the one to do the contact tracing. When the CESU knows about the case, then the CESU would now be able to designate that patient. You know? They would assess where would this patient be most appropriately cared for. Will they be appropriately cared for the quarantine facility, or would they be more appropriately managed in a COVID hospital? Or would they be amenable for home quarantine? So the CESU or the RESU, depending on where you are, would actually have a pivotal role in managing the COVID cases in a community. Okay? So let's talk about what if a patient is not employed. So they would not have employers, right? So for these patients, they can probably consult with the local health center. So there are doctors and nurses also working in the local health center. And then they can be offered the care or swab test from that level of care. And then when they are diagnosed to have COVID as well, then the local health center will remit that information to the CESU. And of course, the CESU would also grind its own gears in documenting, reporting, and contact tracing as well. Okay, some other patients are not that benign, so they catch them in the hospital. So when a patient that is not diagnosed suddenly presents, for example, with difficulty of breathing, then this patient will probably go to the ER first before seeing the employer or the local health center, and thus they would now be diagnosed in the hospital level. Whatever the case is, when a patient is diagnosed, they would now be reported to the CESU or the RESU. And then the CESU or the RESU would now determine where this patient would be properly managed. Now, let me just give you a little bit of insight on which kinds of patients we take care at the quarantine facility. So, for patients who are mild or asymptomatic, these patients are amenable to quarantine facility because in quarantine facilities, we basically have nurses, doctors, and we don't have access to a higher level of care. For example, we don't have access to intravenous blood, right? Or IV antibiotics, for example, or we don't have oxygenation here. So if patients are presenting with moderate, severe, or critical illness, then they would be more appropriately managed at the COVID hospital, where the medical team would be equipped with more arsenal in their in their pocket. So they would have more things that they can offer to these patients that require a higher level of care. So if the patient presents with a lot more symptoms, the patient has a lot more comorbidities, then they would be deemed appropriately managed in the COVID hospital. But if the patient does not have a lot of comorbidities or is presenting only with mild or asymptomatic course, then they would be appropriately managed at the quarantine facility. Some patients can be amenable to home quarantine if they have their own room and if they have their own restroom. Okay, but recently the national government and some of the local government units, they have released their own directives that they don't really prefer home quarantine. So whenever the quarantine facility still has vacant beds, as much as possible, the city or the country would like to place all of these patients in the quarantine facilities rather than home quarantine. But in areas where all of the COVID hospital beds and the facility beds are full, then that's a time that we resort into, into having home quarantine for some patients. Okay, so that's how the system works. So if you're diagnosed with with this particular disease, depending on where you are, on where you're diagnosed, and depending on on your presentation, that would be the possible fates or the possible destinations of where you're going to. So let me just talk about briefly the discharge and recovery criteria. So for example, when you are diagnosed and you are placed in a quarantine facility, how long will you stay there and what will be the standard for you to be deemed as recovered? So the WHO would actually have the standards on the left. As soon as you have 10 days elapsed from the date of onset of the symptoms and you have no more symptoms for 3 days, that will actually be enough for you to be deemed recovered. That's for the WHO and the CDC standards. Our own DOH actually took a step further. So instead of 10 days, we wanted to have 14 days. So 14 days of isolation, clinically recovered, and no symptoms for at least 3 days. That's what we follow in the quarantine facilities. All right. So there's no need for repeat testing. So the question now would be, why not? Why don't we have swabs to document recovery? All right. So they found out that for patients infected with COVID, after 7 to 10 days after being infected, these patients can still have the viral fragments in their body. So if you look at the image on the left, we have the red virus, that is the intact virus. After 10 days of staying inside the person's body, that person would be able to create antibodies to combat this virus, and eventually those viral fragments would be those viral particles rather would be degraded into viral particles. The problem with the PCR test is that it's very sensitive, that it cannot distinguish between viral particles and viral fragments. So the PCR test is so sensitive that it cannot distinguish between live and dead virus. All right. So just a historical point of view on how was this discovered. In Singapore and Korea, they noticed a few patients persistently testing positive for about 2 months to 3 months. They keep on testing this patient every single week, and then one day they realized probably what if we culture the virus? Meaning we try to let the virus grow in a petri dish and observe if it is alive or not. So they found out that for patients who have been consistently testing positive, these viral particles, when they culture it, it's not alive anymore. Okay? So that viral culture thing, unfortunately, we don't have that in the Philippines, so we cannot do it. So basically, we're just doing all of these recommendations based on data that has been presented by our colleagues in Singapore and in South Korea. So the long story of it, we don't require testing anymore after the 14 days because again, if you can still test positive, but that doesn't mean that you are still infectious, because for all we know, the PCR swab can just pick up the dead viral particles. All right. And the last part of my talk would be to talk about the new normal and to talk about the things that has been mentioned in social media and in the news lately. I would try to give you a different take on it, but basically what has been said in the media and the social media is actually very appropriate. So I would echo some of them right here. So I would first talk about how to prevent this, right? So first is to protect yourself, because if you protect yourself, you're basically protecting everyone around you. Agree? And that's the reason why I wanted to say it's unity in uncertainty, because as long as as long as everyone is protected, it's sort of as long as individually we're all protected, it's basically also protecting the collective health of our community, of our company. So how do we get COVID-19? So the main mode of transmission still is if you come in contact with another person with the virus, or if this person with the virus inadvertently coughs on you or sneezes on you, or if you touch any surface with droplets. So when we speak, when we talk, when we sing, when we sneeze or cough, we don't know it, but we're actually emitting droplets from our breath. And when we are virus infected, these viral particles would actually be included in that droplets from our nose and mouth. And when another person comes near us and eventually puts that particular droplet in their eyes and in their mouth, then they can probably catch the disease. So knowing this, these are the things that we can actually do to prevent the spread of this virus. So if someone in your home is sick, we have to follow that. We have to follow the following steps. So you have to continue to practice everyday actions as usual. You, if you can, you have to segregate that person in his or her own room. If possible, you have to designate a restroom for that person. No, so not that person who is known to be infected should only be the one using their own restroom, and they should not be able to share it. I know it's not possible for the majority of our country of fellow men. That's why it's not amenable for home quarantine. A lot of these patients are amenable for home quarantine. But if you are lucky enough to have that scenario in your household, then as much as possible, give them their own room, give them their own restroom. When caring for your own sick household member, you have to monitor your own health too. I remember when I was infected, my mom and my brother was caring for me, and I was also actually monitoring their own health. I'm also taking their temperature. I'm also monitoring them for symptoms, because I know that just by living with an infected individual, you yourself would be at risk for catching the disease. You have to clean regularly, clean the surfaces that are usually touched. For example, doorknobs, the elevator buttons. What else? The faucet, the one that you touch, the knobs of the faucet, the ref, the door, the handle of the ref. All of these things that are normally touched by people, they are hotspots for to harbor these droplets. So if you become sick, it's your own social responsibility to stay away from others, because if you don't do that, then we will not be able to cut and nip this virus in the bud. All right. Social distancing, this has been echoed many times in a lot of platforms, because it's true. Okay, so this is one of the most important weapons that we have against this virus. So the safest distance would be 1 meter between people. If one of your family members or one of your colleagues develops the following, these are emergency warning signs, meaning these are actually indications for you to be rushed to the emergency room. Do not wait for the clinic, do not wait for your company physician to arrive. If these happen, that's an indication for you to go to the ER. Okay? So other tips that may come in handy when you try to prevent the virus from spreading. So just to summarize, you maintain social distancing, you keep objects and surfaces clean, you wash your hands very frequently. This is actually, we do this very often. Uh, Whenever I go on duty, I probably wash my hands like at least 15 times a day. Okay? You call me crazy, but that's what we do here. So that's to prevent this virus from spreading. And do not touch your eyes or mouth or nose or at all times. When you can't help it, then you probably need to wash your hands more frequently. If you have any mannerisms that you touch your eyes, nose, and or mouth frequently. Okay, so just to give you more information on how long the virus particles last on different surfaces, these are the current data that we have. So for sprayers, like the bottles that we have, they stay on there for 3 hours. So for plastic things, for 3 hours. But for other materials, they can actually last for more than 3 hours. So this would highlight the importance of frequent disinfection, not only in our home, but also in the workplace. If you're going to work, if you're going to the parking lot, for example, if you're going through the elevator, all of those things uh, would have surfaces that can harbor the virus. And thus, as administrators of buildings, administrators of companies, I think it would be prudent that you understand why this is actually part of the protocol to keep on disinfecting every time. So I think the cost that you allot in the disinfection, in the effort in disinfecting would actually outweigh the cost that you would have accrued if the people in your community would actually be infected. And that's why this one is part of the protocol in maintaining a healthy environment, in maintaining a healthy community and workplace. This is actually a very funny slide, but let me take the time to teach everyone how to wash hands. This is actually taught in med school because when we are performing certain operations or procedures with patients, it is our duty to keep our hands clean, and thus we are taught how to keep our hands sanitized, and we're taught like 8 steps. Okay, so basically you have to rub your fingers together, palm to palm, fingernails to fingernails, and then your wrists. You have to clean the wrist as well. You have to clean the thumb, and you have to rub until dry. So basically, every single nook and cranny of your palms and hands, you have to make sure that you touch them, or that the disinfectant, the soap, the water, the alcohol touches all of these surfaces. Because the moment you leave even a tiny sliver of um, of space untouched, then that will not be efficient in cleaning your hands. Okay, so everyone must each do our part in maintaining everyone's hands disinfected. Okay, so I think this one is very relevant, apart from my talk, just to reflect on how the 6 months has been. It has been 6 months, and where are we now? Just to compare, when we started the ECQ in March 18, we only had 140 cases. That's only 3 digits. And as of last night, as of 8 p.m. last night, this is the current total case load that we have. Only shy from 300,000 mark. All right, so the number is actually quite numbing. From 3 digits, we now have 6 digits, right? And I can only see the case going up because it has been going down recently, but I cannot claim that it will go down for extended periods. Hopefully, it will stay down, and hopefully it will remain that way for the months to come. So just a few important notes that I have listed here. The National Capital Region is still the epicenter of our cases in the Philippines. We have now the biggest number of cases in the ASEAN, in our neighboring countries here. Out of the 296,755 confirmed cases, about one-fifth or about 60,000 are active cases. The assuring thing is that almost 95% or more than 95% of these patients are categorized as mild or asymptomatics. And the remaining 3 to 5% would now be categorized in the moderate, critical, and severe cases. So this one, not really talked about in the media that often, but I think relevant for everyone to hear which age range are most affected. And based on the studies that we have, based on the data that we have, it's actually the young professional age group. Why is this? Because they are the ones who are now going to work even after the ECQ has been, after the community quarantine has been relaxed. These are the people that are resuming activities. No, they are now people going to work. They're people reporting on duty. It's very reassuring to find out that the kids are not affected because they don't because we didn't continue physical classes, right? So they are now they're now doing distance learning, and thus we were able to keep the cases among our children low. But then the concerning thing is the young professionals are the most affected population group. For the elderly, it's also refreshing to find out that those senior citizens are not as affected as much. And this is good because they are the vulnerable population. So when they catch the virus, a lot of the times they are more at risk to developing harsher symptoms than the younger ones. How about our recovery and fatality rate? As of late, our recovery rate is about 80%. This is not good. It's actually the third lowest in the ASEAN, faring better only against Myanmar and Indonesia. So we're not doing any good in terms of recovery rate. When you see data in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, and Vietnam, their recovery is upwards of 95%. All right, and I think it's only fair to compare our country with this country because we have similar sizes, we have similar population densities, we have roughly the same GDP. Of course, Singapore is above us, right? But our country is comparable with Thailand, with Vietnam in terms of all the other things that I've mentioned. So why is it that they are able to respond better to the pandemic, or we just don't have lady luck on our side? Who knows? What is assuring though is that our fatality rate is remaining low. The the WHO benchmark is 3%, and we are around half of that. So in terms of fatality, we're doing well. Other looming issues that we still have at this point, the DOH still has gaps in its data collection. The hospital capacity is better now than July and August. Remember that point when a lot of doctors and nurses were calling for a timeout because our hospitals are full and our hospitals are actually not able to cater more per patient because they're at their capacity. So we are doing better now compared to that point. However, the positivity rate is still worse than the WHO benchmark, meaning the more we treat people, the number of people testing positive is still higher than what is predicted by the WHO. Therefore, we're not really testing enough probably. That's one. That's one possible conclusion from that. So let me just touch on the new normal as before I wrap up this talk. So what can we do? This is actually a very informative infographic prepared by the DOH and the RITM. So what is the new normal? Basically, we have to address a new normal in 5 approaches. Okay? And these 5 approaches can be broken down into which particular person, individual, or entity is responsible to deliver that. So for the first bullet here, we have to reduce our vulnerability by keeping our healthy lifestyle. So that reduction of vulnerability is actually weighing on each individual. So that's my responsibility to keep myself healthy. Understood? So that's why I drafted here in the left side, it's the individual's responsibility to keep themselves healthy. Next, reduce virus transmission by observing infection control measures. This one falls on the responsibilities of individuals and employers. And also, if you're talking of work environment, of course you have employers. But if you're talking of school, you have the school administrator. So for this particular slide, I'm talking of employers, right? So the employers must create an enabling environment so that infection won't happen as much in their territory. But of course, no matter what the employers do, if the individual employees do not adhere to these rules, then it would be pointless. So of course, individuals will also have their own contribution in maintaining the second bullet to reduce virus transmission. Okay. The third bullet point is to reduce contact with potential disease carrier. So the moment someone gets sick, okay, the individual itself or his or herself would have the responsibility not to expose more individuals. All right, and of course, the employers would also have to create an enabling community that whenever a person develops symptoms, they should be they should not be uh, they should have they should be allowed some time off from their physical work. Okay, so the employer would also have to be creating an enabling environment for this to happen. Okay, and then for the next tenet of the new normal would be to reduce the duration of the infection by establishing effective disease management mechanisms. This would also still lie on the shoulders of individuals and employers, but more heavily on the LGU. So why did I now include individuals and employers? Because whatever the LGU does, if individually we don't adhere to it, then it would still be pointless. Okay, so the main point person here would be the LGU, but everyone else should still follow. And for the last one, ensuring governance and accountability. This one, the main point person here would be the national government, but everyone else will still be stakeholders. And therefore, we still have roles to play in maintaining the last bullet point of the new normal. So this slide actually gives us the overarching themes of the new normal. Okay? I would not have the time to go in detail for every single scenario, but I have um, located these infographics. So the new normal in our homes, the new normal in the workplace, and the new normal in the schools, which I would happily share with everyone. I just got these infographics from the RITM website, and it gives us a very important overview of what the new normal is like. And I have heard rumors that the new normal will extend up until the December of 2021 because up until now, we don't have any clear timeline of when a vaccine would arrive. All right. So I don't think it's healthy that our government would just count on the vaccine arriving. We have to be proactive and we have to make sure that these new normal controls kick in as early as possible to be able to reduce the burden of this disease. Okay? So I would leave you with one very powerful saying or one very powerful slide. We are only as strong as our weakest link. So imagine this set of people right here is our workplace. Imagine this is Joy-Nostalg, for example. Or if I were living in Pasig, I would imagine this is the Pasig community or in Ortigas probably. So everyone will be protected if everyone follows their own if the protocol of social distancing, washing hands, and so on. But the moment one of us become relaxed, and that person who is relaxed would be exposed to a lot more others, then it would be easy to spread the disease. You understand? So that's why we are only as strong as our weakest link. And I feel that in this, for example, in this facility, whenever I go on duty, everyone will have the responsibilities to keep each individual safe. Because if one of my colleague gets compromised, then I would be compromised as well. So that's a strength, you know. Even though you're acting as an individual, your actions affect more people. And that's why thus the theme unity in uncertainty. Okay? So as long as we are able to observe all of these protocols, as long as each individual would follow protocols and we are actually maintaining a safer community. So even if you're only one person, do not underestimate your contribution in maintaining our country safe. And with that, I conclude my talk. I hope that I have shared enough and I have shared a lot with you guys. And I'm now ready to entertain questions.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Adrian. It's only been a 30-40 minute talk, but we learned so much from you, no? You gave us so much info, so much tips, advice, protocols, and you conveyed it in a very simple, direct, and understandable manner. So thank you so much, Doc Adrian, for that. And I'm sure my colleagues here in Joy-Nostalg would gain and also spread this awareness and information to their loved ones, to their friends outside the company even. No? So Once again, thank you, sir. And this is very timely in our company, knowing the struggles we have, whether we are in our job sites, in our offices, no, whether we are in our project communities, or whether we are at home, or if we are at home, diba? We all have to follow protocol. And that's why I'm very lucky to have with me my co-MC for this morning. He is the Health Management Unit Head, Mr. Sir Mar Estrella. So good morning, Sir Mar. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Sir Mar. Good morning po, Sir Mar, no?
Yeah. Good morning.
So, Sir Mar, we just like to know, no? What's your reaction or insights to Dr. Adrian's talk, and maybe give us a perspective after we heard from the medical perspective. Give us your perspective naman from the corporate or industrial side
Uh,
of the issue.
yes, it's really very inspiring for the thoughts coming from our doctor. Actually, in my experience as a construction workers before, I joined almost 15 years in the construction industries. We all know that the construction sites is a very hazardous workplace. Uh, During those periods, we measure a zero incident and zero accident, where construction sites obtained and recognized by the government. But for this time, COVID-19 is a little different. We need to control ourselves. We need to follow instructions. We need protocols, guidelines to be implemented and observed. So what we hear from the speaker is very inspiring and very educational. And for those words, I think our workers or our employees should clearly understand how COVID-19 endangers our life. So that's what I want to say. And I hope our doctor should continue to support us in inspiring people, giving thoughts for us to be directed in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Mar, for that. No, Sir Mar, can we have a better look at you? Let's see you.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Hi, sir. There you are. All right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
thank you for
Sorry.
that, Sir Mar. No.
Yeah, I'm using
But before we move
so-
forward, I'd like to know, panelists, please show yourselves on camera. And before we get going, I'd like to invite everyone to ask questions. No, perhaps there are questions we'd like to ask Dr. Adrian. I understand that Doc Adrian also has duty to attend to. No, so uh, panelists, please turn on your cameras and your audio. For this morning, we have Joy Francisco from the Organization Development Group as the head. She's part of RMU. We have Sir Roger Villa, Engineering Management Group Head from the PDU. Sir Ben Cortiguera, Construction Manager from the PDU. Paul Galima, Project Engineer from the PDU. And Malu Gutierrez, Registration and Institutional Compliance Officer, also from the PDU. So welcome everyone on board, no? So before we give our insights and share our experiences, I invite you now to please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask Doc Adrian. Also for our viewers in our offices and at home, you may input your questions in the chat box. So at this point, do we have any questions?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Jello, and good morning, sir.
Well, hello. Maybe if I can just go ahead and give a bit of comment and question, because unfortunately I have to leave early. There's a board meeting that I have to catch.
Go ahead,
But
sir.
first and foremost, Dr. Adrian, once again, thank you very much. For those of you who were able to catch a little bit of our discussion, Dr. Adrian has been very helpful with personally to our family, because in our households we have people who actually got infected, and Dr. Adrian was very helpful in being able to facilitate the care for these people. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Adrian, and more thankful because this whole topic actually was an idea born from him. So he was the one who was telling me, "Is it all right? If would you like? Would you mind if uh, I can?" Or he was telling me that he can share all of this information because siguro napansin ni Dr. Adrian na napakakulit ko, no? Ang dami kong tinatanong. Kaya sabi niya, turo mo na nga
Sir,
to.
no problem, sir.
So I'm very thankful, Dr. Adrian, that you took time out to prepare for this. You were discussing how busy you are, and yet here you are. You're having this moment with us to be able to help uh, help all of us understand this predicament a little bit better. So for that, thank you very much, Dr. Adrian. So I also want to have. I also have. Unfortunately, we have. I don't have much time, but I do want to ask some questions. One of the questions that's been going on in my mind is this, no, Doc Adrian, is that in the onset of the pandemic, sometime March, no, I mean the pandemic was with us as early as January, except that it was only officially declared as a problematic issue uh, sometime in March. No, that's when people came back from Japan and started spreading the virus here with us. No, um, and at that time, uh, everybody somehow knew somebody who got COVID-19. Well, until today, people know somebody who got COVID-19. Except that at those times, it seems I seem to have a personal observation that the cases at that time, maybe even until the end of May or towards the end of May, a lot of the cases were very severe. So there are a lot of discussions about how immediately ICUs are filled up, immediately what do you call this? What's that machine? No, that
The
uh,
ventilator.
ventilator
Vent-
is very much on demand and stuff like this. Then of course now you have you seem to hear less of that, and in fact the statistics that you have presented shows that only around 3% are actually severe. That in fact 10% are as high as 10% is even asymptomatic. So you then have that whole majority of 87% that are mild or considered okay, not so bad, right? Um, uh, my thinking there, my observation, my assumption is this the case because there are more protection that is happening. Number one, there's more knowledge on how to protect. Number two, there are more materials available to protect. Now we know about this. Now we know about efficiencies of mask, even lately face shield. Uh, we know these things. We knew it also in the beginning, except that we couldn't find mask. I remember when we started out buying mask in the month of March, we were looking at 25 pesos to 15 pesos per mask. And nakala namin, ang galing na namin na nakakuha kami ng mask ng 15 pesos. And then, of course, today, you can buy mask now at 3 pesos. So it just shows you that the availability is much higher now than before. So that's my question. Are all of these protection that we know, and are all of these protection that are being done? We know it, and at the same time being done, and I would like to believe that more and more people are doing these protective measures than before. And so does that therefore help in the viral load? Meaning to say that when we do get exposed, unfortunately, we still get exposed despite all of this. And when we do get exposed, is there such a thing as a viral load that is lighter, and so therefore the infection then therefore is, I don't know, lighter, and so therefore symptoms or the effects of the disease is milder. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir, that actually makes perfect sense. So one of the theories that would explain why people sometimes present with mild or asymptomatic disease is that they catch only a little bit of the virus particles. So for instance, you have two individuals perfectly healthy, everything else is the same. For example, they're twins. If one of them is exposed to, let's say, 10 copies of the virus, and another of them and the other twin was exposed to, let's say, 1 million copies of the virus, and we can probably expect that the twin receiving the million copy would have um, more disease progression, meaning he would suffer more symptoms and thus would probably progress to a more severe course of the disease. And to connect to what you were saying, since we now have more information and we now are more OC in terms of wearing masks, wearing face shields all the time, washing our hands, then we can probably assume that most of the people are getting only a little bit of the virus if they are exposed. And my second point is right now we have more access to testing, and thus we're able to test even the mild individuals. Early on in the pandemic, we were only able to test people who are presenting with critical illness, and thus almost all of our cases are in the ICU. Because why would you test randomly everyone in the street at that point? So therefore, at that point, we were hearing a lot of things about the ICU because that's where we test. That's the limitation of our testing capacity at that point in time. It didn't make sense to test a lot of people at that time because we have very limited capacity and we can only test those with severe symptoms. But right now, since we have more capacity to test, then we're seeing that only a small portion lang pala yung nasa ICU.
All right, thank
I
you
hope
very much.
that addresses the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, yes. Well, then for everybody, that's one great incentive to really protect yourselves and to protect each other, because then because there doc, there is sometimes I encounter people now with this attitude, eh kung matatamaan naman talaga, eh di magpatama na, no? Parang there's this carefree attitude, diba? Parang I'm sick and tired of all of this, nakakainis na nakakabaliw na tong ginagawa ko, eh hindi naman ako nagkakasakit, at kung meron man nagkasakit, eh asymptomatic naman, sipon-sipon lang, eh di magpakasakit na nga ako para matapos na.
I think, sir, yung mga ganun magsalita, I mean, I've also met a lot of patients na ganun yung thinking nila, sir. No? But I think what they're not thinking about is, hindi pa siguro sila nagkaroon ng relative na napunta sa severe. Kasi, yes, a lot of patients would present with mild or asymptomatic disease. But when COVID hits, it hits you hard. Yun yung medyo hindi namin actually magets. Bakit kapag ang pangit ng progression ng disease, ngayon hinihingal ka lang, bukas tutubuhan ka na. Mabilis yung progression. Hindi namin ma-explain bakit ang bilis. And bakit nangyayari yon sa ibang pasyente na kahit wala namang ibang disease. So, I don't want to spread fear, but those things kasi happen. And I think mas ma-appreciate natin yung maliliit na bagay kung meron tayong relative or loved one na umabot sa ganon para mas maintindihan natin yung value kung ba't natin ginagawa sila.
Right. And I guess one of the things that I've been saying is that we can live together with this virus. And in fact, we probably have no choice, like what you said earlier, that there are official reports, studies that conclude that we should probably be living with this virus at least until the end of next year.
Yes.
And we then therefore obviously just have to live with it, because it's we have no choice. Yeah, it's there, diba?
Yes.
And what I keep on thinking is that we can only therefore live with it by protecting ourselves against the virus. Because the moment the virus hits our body, at that point, unfortunately, it seems that we cannot do anything anymore except just to let our bodies figure out how our own bodies can sort of deal with the virus. So we can do almost everything that we can prior to getting sick. But the moment we get sick, that's it. We it's almost like a total opposite wherein we really cannot do anything but just wait. Because in terms of medication, there's really no direct medication. There is
Yeah.
medication for the side symptoms,
Yes.
but not directly to the COVID. There's no tablet that says, okay, I'll drink this for 5 days and I'm gonna get well.
Yes.
Diba? So yun.
Unfortunately, sir, if you develop that, you'll be a rich man. I'm telling you. I mean, you'll be way richer.
So yeah, so that's what I've been wanting to say, that we can live with the virus. We just have to learn how to really be diligent in protecting ourselves
Yes, yes.
against this virus, because we can. And unfortunately, when we don't, then that's it. So yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Doc Adrian, and I hope everybody gets to ask more of their question. I can see that there are several questions here, Jello.
Yes,
I
yes, sir.
think, Doc Adrian, a lot of people have much more questions, and I think it's better that you explain it to them. You have a lot of credibility. You've been there in the front lines. Thank you very much for your service and your sacrifice. And I just have to excuse myself for the moment because I have to jump to another board meeting. But Doc Adrian, thank you very much. And everybody in Joy-Nostalg, uh, please listen, remember the message, and please spread it out to everybody. I've always said that the first line of protection is knowledge. So here we are. We have this knowledge. Please, let's use it and share it with others. Thank you again, Doc Adrian.
Thank you, sir. It has been my pleasure.
We'd like to give the questions to Dr. Adrian. So, first comment from Mr. Terence Ang. Thanks, Doc Adrian, for your inputs today. And I think he speaks for all of us. Once again, thank you so much, Doc. Now, we have an anonymous asker here. He or she said, in some workplaces like construction sites, use of face shields can be hazardous. Apart from distancing and wearing of masks, are there any measures that can substitute for the use of face shields?
Mm,
No, I think I'm not sure why it's hazardous, no,
okay,
but I think
guys.
it's the report.
If you have seen those face shields that normally the welders wear, I don't know. The one with the yellow cap with the thing that in the thing
Yeah.
in front of your face. I guess as long as it provides adequate protection for the eyes and the mouth, I think that will be good. So your respirator, whether it be a surgical grade face mask, KN95, an N95 mask, or in addition with the goggles or a face shield that's keeping everything in your face concealed, that would be enough or adequate for that.
Okay, thanks, Doc. Thank you so much. We have one more questions here. Doc, what is the best disinfection agent? There are so many out there now, and it's difficult to evaluate the products available. What are the right criteria or parameters for us to choose a professional grade disinfection formula or product? This is by Attorney Marian Coquilla Regidor.
Um, uh, we use bleach that we diluted with water in disinfecting inanimate objects. So I guess it's important for me to bring up the difference between disinfection and sanitation. So for example, when we sanitize your hands, we use alcohol. 70% alcohol that would be preferred, right? But when we disinfect surfaces, we have to use a stronger grade of a chemical because, as mentioned, the virus would actually be able to persist in more in these surfaces as well. So I'll just type my answer here: 70% alcohol for sanitize for sanitizing your hands or for your body, and then bleach mixed with water. So I think 1:10 would actually be a good start. For inanimate surfaces. But if you want to be brand conscious, Lysol will do the trick. There you go.
All right. Okay, thanks, Doc, for that. So another question by attorney. Uh, we observe that it's common for people to underestimate or downplay their symptoms. Example, it's just a sore throat. I usually have a cold during the rainy season. It's a low-grade fever. And I think we here can all say that, no? Then they come to work or interact with other people for a few days and eventually they test positive and realize they infected so many people. How do you think can we address this? What can you say to those who keep downplaying their symptoms?
Um, I get this a lot. Like yesterday, today, I interviewed patients who are, we call them, they are in denial that they have COVID. Like at the end of the day, even if whatever symptoms you have no symptoms or mild symptoms, but if you have a PCR positive test, then we cannot dispute the fact that you have COVID. So in order to address this particular issue, I actually try to tell them that it's a good news. I mean, it's not a good news to receive that you have COVID, but it's a good news to receive that you have mild symptoms. You understand? Because the thinking is, if eventually everyone will eventually get the virus, then you're lucky that you had the virus and now you're presenting with mild symptoms. And I've encountered a lot of patients that I've explained to them that way. And the next time that we met, they now have a better appreciation of their symptoms. Buti na lang mild pala ako. Kasi previously, Doc, mukha namang hindi COVID to eh. Wala naman akong nararamdaman. And then after ko i-counsel na ganon, yung next meeting namin, buti na lang mild lang yung symptoms ko. Parang gano'n na yung realization nila. So I think, di ba Jeron, pag-usapan natin din, no? Kasi nagkaroon tayo pareho ng mild. So medyo maswerte na rin tayo na nagka-COVID tayo na mild na. I know it's never easy to hear na maswerte ka, nagka-COVID ka. Pero pag dinugtungan mo yun na maswerte ka, nagka-COVID ka, tapos mild lang.
Oh,
I
naman.
think that would actually be more acceptable and palatable to the ears.
Definitely, especially with what media has been showing. Diba? We see people in ventilators, intubated, people who have been put to sleep in the ICU, emergency room.
Yeah.
Diba? The fact
So,
that we did not get that far, it's a blessing, no? So thank you for
actually,
that reminder, Doc. No?
I mean, I take the mild any day more than
Yes.
being, being in the ICU.
Yes, agree. No? So thank you for that reminder, Doc. No? So, okay. One more question from attorney. If we no longer subject to PCR testing, those who've clinically recovered, how do we catch those that might actually have been reinfected and not just with viral fragments? This is important for us in refining our return to work protocols. Thanks.
All right. Actually, this is one of the, I have to admit, there are still questions that science has not been able to provide clear answers with. And the issue versus latency and reinfection has not been addressed clearly yet. So what is latency? HIV, for example. Let me just cite a different virus example. If I get HIV, I don't present any symptom of HIV, but I have it. And then later on, HIV will resurface in my body. So, ibig sabihin nun, pwede ko ma-infect dito sa part na to ng time, wala akong sintomas na matagal, tapos magkakaroon ako ng sintomas ulit. So that's latency. That can apply to COVID. Kasi for example, na-infect ka noong April, gumaling ka na kasi wala ka na sintomas, paano pala kung nagtatago na siya sa katawan mo, tapos lumabas siya ulit ng, let's say, December. Or, another story would be, nag-recover ka, tapos na-infect ka ulit. So yun yung hindi pa nasasagot actually ng scientific community. Ano ba talagang meron? Latency or recovery? Now, with regards to how do I connect this to testing, if a patient has been deemed recovered, siya kailangan i-test, di ba? But if the patient would now present again with symptoms, or kung exposed ulit siya sa known case, then papasok ulit siya sa possible na ma-candidate for test. So, the long story of it, the short version of it is, kapag na-recover ka na, back ka na sa community, right? Mag-a-apply na ulit sa'yo yung mga standards kung bakit tinetest lahat. Kung nagka-symptoms ka ba or na-expose ka. Yun pa rin yung very important guide in trying to prescribe who is deserving of a test and who is not deserving of a test.
Right.
So yun. Yes, okay.
Okay,
I
thanks.
hope I address your question, attorney. Hindi ko na tinatype.
Sige. Thank you, Doc. Okay, anonymous person. How can those who have gotten the virus and recovered can still get reinfected? So she's asking, how can this happen?
One of the possible mechanisms, Jello, is, di ba, when we are infected with the virus, we develop antibodies. That's what we
Right.
actually test in the rapid antibody test. So the antibodies are meant to protect us from the virus, right? The problem is the antibodies do not last in our system.
Mhm.
After 2 to 3 months, mawawala na yung antibodies sa system mo. So when the antibodies are down, that's one possible mechanism that makes you vulnerable again to the virus. So let me just disclose this. I got infected with the virus April 9 ako sinwab. April 9 ako na swab. April 17 ko nakuha yung result. Positive ako, right? So nag-recover na ako and then I went back to work and all. August 15, nagpa-test ako nung ECLIA. I tried to find out, meron pa ba akong antibodies? Wala na, zero na yung antibodies. So my body is a living example that one, I can be infected with the virus. Two, I can recover. And after several months, the antibody titers in my body will now be negligible. So which renders me again vulnerable for another bout of infection. That's actually the reality that we're facing.
Right, thanks, Doc. And I think there's Miss Annie Rodriguez says, thank you, Doc Adrian. So it's another thank you. And then we also have a question here. For COVID-19 patient declared as clinically recovered, is there a relapse of the symptom virus or is it simply a reinfection from COVID-19?
If I were to choose which is the more likely thing, it would be a reinfection. There are other possible scenarios that can explain this. First, the symptoms after recovery can probably be attributed to a different disease. Next, and for another explanation would be reinfection, as the person asking would suggest.
Okay, thanks, Doc. From another one, from Sir Eddie Mendoza, should I have myself tested even if I have no symptoms or even if there is no notice that I have been exposed?
Sir Eddie, it's very important to ask for the motivation. So for example, if you have something to do, if it's necessary for pre-employment, if you're going abroad, if you're going outside the NCR, then by all means. But if you're just having yourself tested, na wala lang, I think it would be exhausting. Why? How often are you going to do that? How often can you commit doing that? Right? So if we are just going to test, I call it indiscriminate testing. Basta patest lang tayo ng patest. Hindi siya ganun ka wise use of resources. Okay? Kasi kunyari mag-test ka today, negative. That doesn't mean na after 10 days, nag-join ka sa community, negative ka pa rin.
Right.
So, I think it's important to have an introspect. Ano ba motivation ko for testing? Ba't ko ba siya kailangan? So, kung wala ka namang real reason, like for example, pre-employment, pupunta sa ibang bansa or whatever, wag na lang. I think your money would be better spent acquiring vitamins, acquiring masks, acquiring hand sanitizers, And this would actually be more wise use of our resources. Tapos, kung nagka-symptom ka or exposed ka, then that's the time you invest in as well.
Right. Agree. Thank you, Doc. Thank you. Okay, so Attorney Marian says thank you for all the answers you've given her. So thank you, Doc Dao. Okay, we have two more. Are there any updates on the effectivity of blood plasma of recovered patients as possible vaccine or COVID medicine?
Um, Kasi yung blood plasma, it's not comparable with the vaccine. No? Parang ang nangyayari kasi sa blood plasma, we're giving antibodies to patients who are severe in condition. So, kumbaga, yun, may disease na sila, ginagamit mo na yung plasma para i-cure sila. Ano ba yung ginagawa ni vaccine? Vaccine hindi kasi cure eh. Di ba si blood plasma, cure yon. Si vaccine, prevention. So, kunyari, person A, wala pa siyang virus at all. Pag binakunahan ko si person A, si person A would now have the protection against the disease. So, with regards to your question, comparing blood plasma and vaccine is like comparing apples and oranges. They have different purposes. One is for cure, blood plasma is for cure, vaccine is for prevention.
Okay. All right. And we have a follow-up question from Sir Eddie. Therefore, is it wise to do batch testing for companies? And if so, how often and what is the value of this?
Okay. Very good, Sir Eddie, for bringing that up. I almost forgot to bring this up. This is very relevant to a setting or to a multinational, to a very big company like yours. No? So, ano ba yung batch testing muna? So, nangyari dyan kasi, Jello, for example, meron akong 10 tao. Instead of paying or swab test of each individual, yung 10 yan, gagawin ko, kukuha ko ng swab ng 10, yung 10 paghahaluin ko sa isang sample. Tapos ang i-PCR ko lang yung isang pinaghalo-halong sample. Bakit? Kasi kung negative yung isang pinaghalo-halong sample, ibig sabihin negative yung 10. Kung positive yung pinaghalo-halo, saka ko palang i-test individually. So in short, nakatipid ako kung negative sila lahat.
Okay.
Eh kung halimbawa 10,000 yung employees mo, tapos ginawa mo, pinul mo sila lahat. So 50 or 20 for example. If you compute the math that would arrive from that particular setting, mas makakatipid ka pa rin kapag nag-pool testing ka. We call it pool testing. So when you are testing in the context of many or a group of people, I think batch testing provide a unique value. How often? Once a month would be prudent if you have the resources and you have access to it. So, yon. So, batch testing, pool testing for asymptomatic individuals. Pero kailangan meron pa rin tayong ibang mechanism for testing people who have the symptoms and who have been exposed. Kasi yun pa rin yung pinakamahalaga. Yung may symptoms at yung exposed. Yung routine testing, for me, in my personal opinion, that's just tertiary. Kumbaga, mas mahalaga pa rin yung first two.
Okay, thank you, Doc. And we have one last question here in the chat box. Apart from social distancing, washing hands, disinfection, wearing PPE, and keeping a healthy lifestyle, what else can the Filipino general masses do to beat the virus? I'm just wondering how come other ASEAN countries like Thailand are winning against the virus, and it seems that we have so many infected every day.
I think lahat ng sinabi mo, anonymous sa TND, yun yung pinakamahalaga talaga. Like, as long as everyone is able to do that, matatalo natin itong virus. Secondary, siguro yung mga social impact. Sa atin kasi matindi yung judge. Ang daming mga pasyente, nahihiya silang aminin na meron silang symptoms. So, I guess another barrier for Filipinos is, ito very rampant kasi tayo, medyo mahihiyain tayo as a race. Lagi natin iniisip, ano kaya iisipin yung kapitbahay ko? Ano kaya sasabihin nila? Ano kaya sasabihin ng ganitong tao? So, kapag yung isang pasyente nagkasakit, dinideny niya part of it because nahihiya siyang sabihin, nahihiya siya sa pagsasabihan na ano sabihin sa kanya ng ibang tao. Kaya dahil doon, nadidelay tuloy yung pag-isolate sa kanya, nadidelay yung pag-seek ng care. And I think that adds to the difficulty, no? Kasi whenever we have patients na susunduin namin sa community, itong patient na to, may mga patients na may request na, Doc, pwede bang yung ambulance doon na lang sa kabilang kanto para hindi makita ng kapitbahay ko? May ganon. So, syempre, concerned kami na pag yung pasyente yun lumabas ng bahay, you're endangering the people na makakasalamuha mo kapag lalabas ka ng bahay. So, I think that's adding to the challenge. As a nation, medyo we have that kind of self-pride. Ayaw natin pinag-uusapan, pinag-chismisan. Pero tanggapin na sana natin, nasa pandemya naman tayo eh. Normal naman, I mean,
Yeah, normal na siya.
normal na siya eh. So, dapat siguro andun na tayo, na i-accept na natin na andun na tayo.
So with that, Doc, thank you. No, in our next segment, we our colleagues who have been infected will share their stories and their advice to the colleagues. No, you're free to be with us, but you told me a while ago you have duty to attend. You know, so
Well, I'm sorry. I would, as much as I'd like to stay, yeah. And
Yeah.
for everyone who has been listening for the entire morning, thank you for listening. I hope you learned something.
yes,
Ayun. Jello knows my email if you have any questions. I'll try to email back. Thank
Sige.
you all.
Doc, again,
Thank you.
so much. We really hope to have you here back once again. And also thank you to Miss Ida Velasco, diba, who also recommended her own son. So good job, Miss Ida. And good job, Doc,
Listening.
again. Sige.
Bye-bye. Okay, thank you, Jello.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Doc.
Bye. See you again soon.
everyone.